Hi, my name is Burton Richardson, and I have a whole bunch of extendable batons that I've been working with, and I'm going to review them. I have several categories, and we'll go through each category one at a time, looking at the different batons. Also, something to think of from the start, law enforcement and military have different uses than civilians. So I'll mention the differences when they're appropriate between law enforcement and civilian use of the extendable baton. There are a lot of extendable baton makers, but we're going to look at products from 3 reputable companies. First, we're going to look at a lower cost ESP. That's the brand name, ESP. And this is an 18-inch. We'll also look at a 23-inch from ESP. We're going to look at an ASP Talon Infinity baton. ASP has been in, they were one of the originators early on, and they put out amazing products for quite a long time. Not low cost, very high quality. And we're going to look at the RCB, which is from PEACEKEEPER. And I had a lot of people tell me you have to review one of these, so we have a 24-inch to review. Civilian ease of carry. Law enforcement officers have actual holsters for the baton, so it's made to fit on the belt. So for civilians, if you have a fanny pack, maybe you can put that in. If you have a backpack, but probably the easiest way to carry it, because I think most civilians will not wear a holster, is just simply to slide it into your pocket. So here's the ESP 18-inch. I put that in there and it fits well. And I took all of these and I actually carried them. I'd carry them for a full day and many times, going and doing everything, sitting in the car without taking it out, going to shopping, doing whatever. And interestingly enough, I never saw anybody look and go, what is in that guy's pocket? So the 18-inch, of course, the smaller, makes it easier to carry. And you can't even see the end of it. We'll talk about drawing in a little bit when we get to the larger one, the 23-inch. You can see there's a little bit sticking out, but still it's actually quite comfortable. When we get to the ASP, it's a little heavier. And it has this tip at the end, put that in, and you can feel a difference in the weight compared to the ESP. So there's a little more weight, which means more hitting power too. It's a little more weight, comes out, protrudes a bit more, so it's a little more noticeable. And then with the RCB, put that in, same thing, there's protrusion. Interesting with the RCB because it's very much weighted toward the end. They did that on purpose to put more weight toward the tip. When you put it in, I believe it's very comfortable to carry, and I believe it's because there's so much weight down here at the tip, there's not so much pulling it sideways here, so right in here. So ease of carry, pretty much all of them, to me, even though some of them are larger and heavier, pretty easy to carry in a pocket. Drawing, if we start, again, with the 18-inch. When it goes in, a couple things. One, when you reach to get it, there's nothing to grab on the outside, so you have to put your hand in deeper. And remember, when you're drawing, chances are that means you're under pressure. So you're dealing with somebody as you're trying to draw here. So you just have to put your hand in deeper, get a hold of it, and then pull it out. Now, one thing, the ESP has a really nice grip. I mean, when this thing's in your hand, that's not going anywhere. There's a lot of knurling on it. The downside is it's more likely to get stuck in your pocket as you're pulling it out. But if you just put your hand over it and pull it out, I haven't had any trouble at all. So that's with the 18-inch. With the larger 23.5, again, I don't have to put my hand in as deep into the pocket because the tip is right here, the end is right there, so I can draw that out. Notice I'm not using 2 hands to draw because I'm assuming if you're legally justified to draw, that means you're probably under attack already. I mean, it could be somebody with a knife over there, but a lot easier if you can use 2 hands. But one hand, again, reach into your pocket. You don't have to reach as far because it's longer. And the same thing goes for the ASP. Nice thing about the ASP, it is really smooth. You have a good grip because it's this very dense foam, and I've had ASPs for years and years and years. I've really liked them. But this one, you reach in and it slides out. Even if I only grab the tip, it would slide out very easily because this is fairly smooth. And then with PEACEKEEPER's RCB, same thing. It has it's very smooth to get it out. So you just have to reach in, pull out, and there you have it. Opening. Opening is pretty simple. You can go downward, you can go upwards. Sometimes you can, if you're trained in stick fighting, you can actually do a redondo type motion and take that out. So they all open pretty well. The 18-inch, I feel like you have to pop it a little more, the ESP, to actually get it to stick. Like I just did the redondo opening and I can feel just a little bit of wiggle in there. Not much, but just a touch. It didn't feel like it locked totally out. If you come down, it locks out quite well. The 23.5-inch, same thing. If you go like this, it's ready to go here. And the same with the ASP, of course. Take this here. If I go, it opens, ready to go. And same thing with the PEACEKEEPER, just a nice sharp one. And you hear that thing really makes a report. It sounds like you just loaded or slid the slide on your gun. So opening, they all open quite well, and they tend to come out in good form.
Closing, this is another difference between law enforcement and civilian. Law enforcement, chances are, they may have somebody else there. When they finish, they can take their time, close it up afterwards, put it in their holster. Whereas a civilian may actually be holding on to the person and needs to keep this in their hand, so closing probably isn't that important. Closing the baton. Closing may not be that important because you're using the baton, and when the encounter is finished, you have plenty of time to actually close. Now the difference being that in law enforcement, they may use the baton, get someone to the ground, and then have to cuff that person. Well, they may need to be able to quickly close and reholster while they're keeping control of a suspect. Whereas in civilian, you're probably going to get out of there as soon as you possibly can, but you will keep this. Even if you have to hold someone for the police, you probably won't need to worry too much about closing it. So when you do close though, a couple ways. For example, this normal way, you just slam it down and there you go. Same with the other ESP, just turn it over, you hold it tight and it's closed. ASP, there's a button at the bottom. You push the button and it closes. That is very, very handy. So if you open and you need to close, you can just push the button and close it. You don't have to pound it on anything. And last with the RCB, just gonna go here. I'm gonna hold this loose because the manufacturer suggests that if you hold it looser, there's more vibration sideways, and there you go, you close it. Interesting also with the RCB, didn't mention in the opening, you can actually grab the tip, open it, same as the ASP, you can grab and open. If this is, sometimes I've had where it was really difficult for me to close it this way, you can just tap to the side, rotate a little bit, and it will loosen it up enough that you can actually close it with your hand.
Striking power. Weight has a lot to do with the striking power. Force equals mass times acceleration. The mass of the weapon will contribute to how much force you can generate. Now you have your own body mechanics, of course, but when we're just talking about the instrument, the weight and where the weight is located and distributed will make a difference. So for example, with this 18-inch, you can generate some power. I feel, this is my impression from being a stick fighter for a long time and actually doing full contact, limited equipment bouts with very little armor, just head protection and a little bit of hand protection. If you hit on the wrist, on the back of the hand, possibly going to the elbow, maybe to the knee or the shin, possibly, it may do the job. A lot of other things, if you're hitting someone in the arm, maybe even the head, I wouldn't want to get hit in the head with this for sure, but someone under adrenaline who is determined, you're going to need more stopping power, I think, than the small one. So you would have to be very accurate with this. And it's not the ESP brand, it's just because of the size of the tool. When we go up to the 23.5, this has considerably more force power generation. The issue is this one has, I feel like, a lot of the weight is back in the handle, so you can maneuver it pretty well, and then it just will take away. If you had more weight out on the tip, it would hit harder. But if you have more weight out on the tip, you may lose a little bit of maneuverability, which we'll talk about in a bit. I like this length and I feel comfortable with it. The asp, the same thing, power generation. I mean, it's got a nice tip on it, has a little larger tip that you can get, and it hits quite hard. The RCB, they designed this with the weight farther out on the tip, and it has a very large tip as well, if you can see. It's much heavier than the other ones. It's considerably heavier. So the striking power, I'm going to tell you, you can hit a lot harder with this. There is also the other side of it. When you have something heavier, it's a little harder to maneuver, which we will talk about in a moment. But if you really want to see a good analysis of striking power without any human input or bias or such, there was a study done at USC, where I happen to go to school, that actually put different batons, a lot of different batons, on a mechanism, and they measured the amount of force that was being generated by the same sort of strike. So I will link that in the description, so you can go look at that yourself, because it's fascinating to see the RCB hits much, much harder than other ones. Even smaller RCBs hit harder than longer of other brands. But again, it's because the weight's out in the tip. So striking power, this is going to be your strongest striking power. This is 24-inch, but compared to the 23.5, 23-inch, this is going to hit quite a bit harder. Thrusting power. If you have a baton which you hit into the ground to close, that means when you hit it, that shock is going to force it to close back into its original closed position. Which means if you thrust hard at somebody and you hit them hard, chances are you may actually close your baton in the midst of combat. So a lot of times, thrusting with a telescopic baton is not advisable. But the asp has an actual locking mechanism, which is very interesting. This thing is locked out, so you can thrust with the asp, hit somebody, and it's not going to close on you. Interestingly enough, but because it actually has a button you push to close it up. Interestingly enough, the RCB, again, a very good advancement, is that they have special locking mechanisms in the baton. So you can thrust full on with this, like full on. I had one of my longtime students who's really strong, and he took this thing, and I held should have videotaped it. I held the bob dummy, and he went wham like this, and it did not close. It actually wobbled his shoulder a little bit, and it bounced me back. So when you do have to close it, interestingly enough, well, I'll talk about that when we talk about closing them, but very good, because you can thrust with this, you can thrust with the asp as well. And sometimes you could be in a situation where somebody has their hands up and you're hitting, and that's just not doing anything, and you need a nice thrust to the solar plexus or the sternum to stop that fight. Durability. Some batons are less durable than others. Now, when you're hitting a human being, chances are, unless you have a lousy quality baton, it's not going to do much damage to your baton. Now, Shelton, my friend that's talking to you about, a longtime student who's extremely strong, he took the ESPs and the asp, and he hit a very, very hard wood with it all out. And he can generate massive amounts of power. And what happened was there's just this I can see it from here. I'm sure you can't see it. There's a slight curve in this small one after taking that torture test. This also has a very slight curve, but it didn't affect the functionality of it. You can still close it, you can still open it, you can still hit with it. But there is a slight curvature to it. The asp, there was nothing. No curving, it's like brand new. Even after heavy hitting on a very, very hard target. I used this one and I hit a piece of wood that maybe wasn't as hard as Shelton's Kiawe, a local Hawaiian wood, but nothing. I hit it very, very hard and many times two-handed, and it is just straight. I mean, it's very well made, both the asp and the RCB high-level materials. So durability-wise, when you pay extra, well, it's not because you pay extra, but the asp and the RCB use more expensive materials, and they definitely are a little more durable. Maneuverability. Now here is where it comes down to actual fighting skill. What kind of skills do you have? And what are you going against? If you were just going against somebody who's just resisting, they're fighting you a little bit, and you say, man, I just have to stop this person, you might be able to just hit them a bunch of times in the leg. You might be able to hit them in the hand. If it's legally justified, you might have to hit to the head. Okay, fine. You can do that with a small one, which is going to have as much power, or you can do that with the heavier, like the RCB, and you can get a two-handed shot and hit. Okay, great. But when we're talking about dealing with someone, say, that has a knife, now we have a different mode. We have to be maneuverable. In other words, I can't just go, guy has a knife, I'm just going to step in and hit him in the head. I'm just going to hit him in the leg because that knife is coming in. We're going to have to be able to move and actually hit with that and be accurate and quick. There's a balance between power generation and quickness. If you generate massive amounts of power, but you're slow, someone comes in with a knife, you may not pick it up in time. If you are very quick, but you don't have much power, and somebody comes in with that knife, you hit them in the arm, and you don't hit them right on the nerve, which is difficult to do in reality. It's easy when they're holding their arm out there, but in reality, under the stress, and you're moving, and they're moving and coming in, you might hit them on the flesh, and it doesn't do anything. So we have to have that balance. Personally, because of my training, I like having the maneuverability primary, and then of course I have to have enough power generation. Now, I'm in my 60s, and I had a bunch of surgeries and all this over the last couple of years, several years, so I am not physically really very strong right now. So for me personally, for example, I pick up this 23-inch. If I hold it all the way down at the bottom here and I feel that I can maneuver it okay, but it's not quite the quickness I would prefer. If I choke up just an inch off that knurling, now I feel like I can move better and hit with it. I feel like I will generate good power and I will hit. So just having that little extra counterbalance there makes a difference. I'm going to pick up the asp, and this is totally my personal preference. And I'll say it now. You have to try for yourself. You have to know how strong you are. You have to know your skills. You have to know how maneuverable you are with the weapon. So with the asp, one thing I'm going to mention is it rattles a little bit. When it's fully locked out, there's still a little rattle, and I believe that's partly because the closing mechanism, the push button. So there's a little rattle, and that bothers some people, and personally, I would prefer something really solid myself, probably from all my stick fighting. Does it make a difference functionally? Probably not. Like I said, it hits very hard still, but I would prefer it not to have that rattle. This is heavier than the ESP and didn't bend in that torture testing, it's a little slower yet for me. So for me, I would probably go more down to something like the 20-inch range for myself because of my current physical condition and my strength. The RCB, this one hits the hardest. It's extremely durable. It has so many good qualities like being able to thrust and all. For me, on this 24-inch, I would have to use two hands to really hit hard because when I'm swinging this, you can see I'm pretty slow with it. And I'm trying to control it. I'm pretty slow. If I use two hands, I'm faster, but then I don't have my other hand to actually block with, and I don't have quite the maneuverability on certain moves. So maneuverability-wise, heaviness, you know, the weight of it, and your own strength and your training. That's why you have to find what's best for you. If you're not highly trained, and say a police officer, you're probably best off with this. One thing I'll say about, again, difference between civilian and police is that if someone is empty-handed and the police are justified, they will use the baton, and they can use two hands and try to hit to the leg and make the person stop, okay? Now, if they see someone drawing a knife, they are going to drop it or put it away, and they're going to go to a higher level of force. They're going to pull out their firearm. Civilians, it's like, this is what you have, you know, unless you carry a gun too. And we're not talking about people. We're talking about people that are just carrying this. So this has to work for empty hand, and it has to work for a knife. It has to work for multiple attackers. So you need maneuverability. If I have two people come at me and I go this way, I go wham like this, by the time I come back, they're on me. Whereas if I can possibly, you know, go and have more maneuverability with this, I just have more options. I can still hit accurately and strong. So personally, maneuverability-wise, this was what feels best to me, this 23-inch, because it's a little bit lighter. Again, one more time, you have to assess your strength, your own skill level, and what you're using it for. Overall impressions, the smaller ESP, very maneuverable, hits hard if you hit the correct target, so can be effective on certain targets. Definitely easy to carry. So doesn't do you any good if you don't carry it with you. And if you have something that you're like, wow, this is the one I really love, but I'm not going to carry it it's too much of a hassle, well, then it does you no good. So first you have to have something you're going to take with you. The 23-inch ESP, really like the feel, the maneuverability. Again, for my strength at this point, I like the blend of maneuverability and power generation for me. The ASP, amazing, you know, really, gosh, amazing technology. It's really beautiful. You can see the quality of the workmanship. Again, I'm not wild about the rattle, but it really doesn't affect the hitting. And it hits very hard, a little bit heavier. So for me, it ends up being a little bit slower. And the RCB, which is just, again, another technological wonder. They put the weight down farther, so it hits harder. It is very heavy, depending on your strength and experience. If you're strong enough, this would be, man, this is a massive fight ender because it generates so much power. You have a much better chance of stopping someone instead of hitting them, because just because you hit somebody with a baton doesn't mean they're going to stop. You actually have to make them stop. So it's just an amazing piece of work as well. One last word of caution. Make sure if you're using a baton that it's legal to carry where you are, and you know the legalities about when you are legally justified to draw and present the baton, and when you are actually using it in self-defense, what the parameters are there. When are you justified in using that? So just, you know, very important to have that legal background. And one last thing, don't buy a cheap baton. You know, if you actually have to use it someday, then you want to make sure you know you can rely upon it. There are a lot of batons that are quite inexpensive. They have the button that extends them and all that, and if you actually hit something hard, it's going to break apart. So I would suggest getting something high quality, and generally the higher quality yet, it's going to cost you more. But to me, if I'm out and protecting myself and my family, I want the most reliable tool I can possibly have.